welcome to the stage, Mark Shteller! Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, Mark.
How's everybody doing tonight? Lovely audience tonight.
Lovely presenter.
Thank you.
Healing outfit.
Okay, so just a little bit about me. I was born in Israel, basically playing games since I was 4, making games since I was 12 in Flash, R.I.P. Flash. Came out as gay as when I was 16, if anyone has like any, getting paid for making games since 2012, moved to SF in 2018. I worked with Meta for like 3.5 years, worked on a little thing called the Oculus headset, if anyone has tried that. And this year I founded my first company, Diamond Dust Games. Thank you so much.
You're fucking rock.
Okay, so first we have a little bit of a content warning because, just to make sure we're covering some grounds like before we dive in. Yes, so we're gonna be using a lot of profanity. There's gonna be nudity in the sex talk, abuse, sexual assault, homophobia, transphobia. Okay? Okay. All right. So today's gay agenda. We're gonna explore some examples of, like, the earliest examples of sex in video games. A transgender icon in a Nintendo game from the 80s. Examine how queer people portrayed in games over time. Lesbians in The Sims. Groundbreaking. How to gamify relationships. The whole sex box scandal, if anybody remembers that from like a couple of years ago. Hashtag the gay button, not mine. Like, not my creation, but I would have loved to name this before. And we're gonna kind of like wrap it up like where we are today, and when can we improve? How can we make this better? Okay, so where we started, the top image is a game called Custer's Revenge, and this is where like, this is why I had to put like the content warning. Basically, you play as a cowboy, as you see with his boner over there, and he basically needs to dodge like Native American arrows that are coming into him, and the goal is to capture the Native American woman with the huge tits. And there's a very like detailed animation of him fucking her. Like, this is like 1982, I believe. The company is called Mystique. They were primarily making like Atari games kind of like of this vein, and they went out of business. Soon after like these games came out, to be honest. Like, so in the 80s, they were already kind of done. The second image is from a game called Leisure Suit Larry. Who has played Larry before? Yes, because this one has a staying power. This one has a staying power. They've made a shit ton of them after this, just so you know. So you see like representation there is kind of like, still kind of like problematic. But over time the Larry games kind of like became a lot more mature, and they talk about like more, they kind of took the mantle of like teaching young boys and men about sex and how to approach relationships to women and all that stuff. So they might have started like a bit problematic like in the beginning, but they evolved and grew like all of us, hopefully. Okay, so Birdo. Birdo is apparently our first transgender character ever like been like represented in any kind of video game medium that I can find. And I love this story so much because I think it's such a like, I'm pretty sure the translator did this by mistake. Like, it's just as a joke, kind of like, because the English manual for the game, You remember when the games used to come like in a cartridge and a manual, because like to tell you what's the game about, because you couldn't fit any words on the game. So then basically the manual said he thinks he's a girl, he spits eggs out of his mouth, and he'd rather be called Burdetta. Yeah, transgender icon in the 80s. And a Nintendo game, shocked. Okay, so I wanted to go over some more general kind of like queer examples in games, and I'm gonna kind of try to run through them a little faster. And to be frank, a lot of these games, the reason I have them here is because a lot of them are like very dear to my heart, especially stuff like Chrono Trigger, Metal Gear Solid, Bioshock. Like these are the games that kind of like grew up when I was playing. So this is kind of meant as like an exploration and a critique, not necessarily to kind of like drag them through the mud or anything like that. For example, in the sixth Larry game, there's a gay towel attendant, and if you try to flirt with him, there's a game over. So this is the first. So Larry is a game about sex and sexuality and like a man trying to hook up with women and all that stuff. And they took him 6 games to have any gay character in, and the first one that you interact with, you get a game over. Which has, I don't know, I just think it's funny. Streets of Rage 3, Ash. Again, this is kind of like a very, so that's the Prince guy that's on the top left. He was basically very obviously kind of like making fun of these like leathermen in the 90s that you would see like marching and shit. But the thing is that this game and this boss particularly was censored, like in all, not all, but like a lot of countries, like even in Europe, especially in Japan. So this is kind of just like the state of like how like you were just like the whole like thing of like don't say gay bill. It's been happening since forever. Like nothing has changed, to be honest. There's a genderqueer character in Chrono Trigger. They are actually portrayed fairly like figuratively. Saga Frontier, a woman who is cursed to be attracted to other women. I know. Horrible. But the one that I kind of like had like not an emotional connection, but I was kind of like affected by is Vamp from Metal Gear Solid 2. I liked him because he was fierce. He's basically like everybody is super serious in this game. It's like stealth and shooting and like nuclear warfare. Like the game is very complex, and then you have this like he's basically voguing on the battlefield. But this was like a game made by a Japanese studio in 2001. Like it was very groundbreaking at the time, and just the inclusion of like a character that is like very outwardly bi and very it's in the text and it's like being talked about and everybody is kind of like referring to him, even though they kind of refer to him of like, ooh, look at him, he's so weird, he's so disgusting. Even that is like gave my little gay brain some dopamine just like seeing that on screen, even if the representation is not perfect, right? Same thing with Sander Cohen from Bioshock 2. Is basically, this is arguably, he's the boss of a level in the game. This is arguably the most interesting kind of like intricate level in my opinion. But still, like even there, so he's being portrayed as this like deranged auteur. He's making you like kill a bunch of people like in his realm and then take pictures of them, of how you killed them. So he has a thing for snuff. Lovely, we love that. And last but not least is Kanji from Persona 4, if anyone's familiar with Persona. So this is a game from Japan, and Japan is like, it's kind of hard to describe where they're at with their sexuality because it's just like, you know, from the country who brought you bukkake.
Tentacle porn.
And tentacle porn, of course. But they still, like, even to this day, like, they treat, like, being gay as this, like, oh, it's a joke. It's not for real. Like, it's not, like, you know, even today. Again, when I played the game when I was a child, I saw this, like, and he's being, yes, so, like, we still have, like, a bisexual character on screen, which is great, but, like, the teammates are, like, kind of, like, afraid that he'll, like, sexually assault them at night because they go, like, on a camping trip or whatever. So it's a bunch of stuff like that. It's a bunch of stuff that's just, like, there is representation, but... Okay, so I'm gonna talk about The Sims. Who here likes The Sims? All right, fabulous. So, just a quick story. So in the 90s, the game industry in general, they had this perception that video games are for boys. And there's like, it was very clear divide of like, what is a boy game and what is a girl game. Maxis, the people who made like the Sims games, SimCity, all those fun stuff, they wanted to make a game that would appeal to kind of like everybody, both genders, everybody. But the executives at EA, like the publisher, they were like, this is a girl game, like no one's gonna buy this, no one's gonna play this, you know? Like girls, like they don't play real games, like they just want dolls and shit. Like that's literally what kind of like the executives were saying at the time. And then they took the game to E3, which is like the big video game showcase at the time. And while they were like doing the presentation on screen, two of like the female characters on screen started kissing. That was not planned. That was not in the code. It was just like a random fluke. And everybody lost their mind. Everybody started talking about it because of like lesbians. We love lesbians. Yeah, and this is basically the thing that kind of like saved the game because like the executives were this close to like canceling it. And eventually like they saw the excitement, they saw how people are like reacting to it, they're like, okay, we're gonna give it like the budget that it needs and like the time. Yeah. So I also kind of wanted to touch about like marriage in general, like what's the journey that it's been kind of like going through in The Sims. In the beginning, marriage was not really a mechanic like at all. You can like even getting babies. There's a phone that you call that you can adopt a child. This is how you would get babies, and they never grow up. You just have a baby all the time. They do become a child, but then the child doesn't grow up. So yeah, marriage is technically not even a thing at all. And then The Sims 2 did an oopsie, where they implemented marriage for straight couples, and they implemented joint union for same-sex couples. And we know how that goes. Yeah. So when The Sims 3 came out, like people obviously like gave him a lot of feedback and told him like, hey, listen, like this is, you know, like we are aware that you're trying to portray this game as like this is a simulation of life, this is a simulation of like the human experience, right? And this is what we're striving for marriage equality and all that shit. So in The Sims 3, they actually like implemented that. And then in The Sims 4, after a patch that came out kind of like later in the game, later in the life cycle of the game, they actually allowed kind of like full gender customization, meaning doesn't matter what your character starts at, you can change their gender, they can pee standing up or sitting down, they can get pregnant regardless of their like genitals or whatever. Yeah, that's basically it. So I just think it's a fantastic kind of example of like a series that kind of started in a very very well-meaning place. They had a few fumbles along the way, but now they kind of like they're one of the best proponents that we have today for like equality and representation in general. Not a lot of games do this, so kudos to them. Okay, this is my favorite part. So there's a little game called God of War. Some people probably heard of it. But I'm talking about the first God of War that came in 2005. That was on PlayStation 2. I was like 11 when I played it. Yeah. So as you can see, Kratos, like that's the big buff dude that's standing on the bed. This scene is basically happening in like the tutorial level, like the opening of the game. It's this like huge fight and like against the Hydra. The Hydra's like destroying all these like battleships and stuff. And suddenly you drop into this hole that's in the ground and you find these like two women in bed in the middle of this battlefield. So naturally, when you see two women like naked in bed, you have to add a man. At least like by the logic of like the male gaze and everything, right? But my favorite part about this is just like the game obviously is acknowledging sex and you see like titties, but it's everything is kind of like implied. So the moment you press circle, like you see the prompt there, the moment you press circle, the camera zooms in on the vase that's by the bed, and there's like buttons that you need to press in certain like order and stuff, or like rotate the joystick in a very particular way. You know what I'm talking about? And the better you do in this minigame, the harder Kratos fucks the women. And the goal is to drop this vase off the bed. So you win. The win state is basically when the vase falls. Yeah, and then you get like health and stamina for that. So another fun example is from a game called Heavy Rain. It's a little further like down the timeline. But Heavy Rain is this like very cinematic heavy video game where you when they were advertising the game, they were saying it's this like interactive choose your own adventure storybooks sort of thing, where if you fail like in doing like there's a killer that's running after you, and if you fail and your character dies, the story keeps going. That's what they were kind of like advertising. Technically though, it's not actually what was like going on in the game, but still like they did have kind of like fail states for all these kind of like button presses and stuff. So later in the game, there's a sex scene, and this game is kind of notorious for having these like kind of like cumbersome button combinations like to do shit. Like it's to the point where like you start the game, you're a detective sitting in his car, and you need to press a button to kind of like to open the door. Then you press another button to get out of the door. You need another button to take a step out of the car. So it's like very kind of like granular. I was really curious to see how they would like handle like actual sex stuff. And of course, the most complex sequence of like button presses that you have to do is when you need to take the woman's bra off. Very complex, very complex. And then again, they cut off like when they start fucking.
Oh.
Yeah, disappointing.
Good stuff, you know?
Okay. We did talk about Republicans here, like in the previous talk, which I liked. So I have some more if you're interested. Basically, moral panics in video games is something that we're kind of like familiar with, and it just like happens every couple of years. I'm sure people of a certain age remember like the whole thing around Mortal Kombat and how violent it was, and it was like this is incentivizing violence in children. So people had the same thing about a game called Mass Effect, where you can romance sexy aliens. It's a game in space, very much kind of like Star Trek, Star Wars inspired, where you can romance like your crew members, and that kind of like gives you like special connections with them that help you like in the gameplay in the long term. And obviously, if you reach a certain level of romance with them, you get to have sex with them. So this is what like the people are basically like fixated on, and basically saying, how dare they have sex and nudity in video games? Basically saying like this thing should be banned, this thing should not be in games at all. Okay. Okay. And there was another kind of just like quick story from a game called GTA San Andreas. There was a cut content minigame that was actually not in the game, but the developers kind of like programmed it like as a secret, where the main character can fuck his girlfriend, and there's like another like you can see there's a excitement meter there. So this was not in the game, but again like people tried to sue them, and like it became like a whole issue again, just because like there's sex in the game and they're not even naked, like it's just like. Okay, so I mentioned Mass Effect briefly, and Mass Effect is actually a very good example of like how to gamify relationships, because this is kind of like when you think about it, games are like very goal-driven and like you have a win state and a fail state. When we're trying to kind of like apply this kind of logic to relationships in general, it doesn't really work. So games kind of like in the past, so like Skyrim is an example of like you can basically marry any stranger by just having a conversation with them. In my book, that doesn't really is counted as a relationship. I don't know about you, but the Bioware games, for example, is because like you have to sustain this like connection with them, and they have benefits for you. Like if you interact with them and you become in a relationship with them, they go in with you to battle and shit. So yeah. Same thing in the Persona games. You have this like basically the progression of like being in relationships with people is how much time you spend with them, which is pretty good. Okay. Which is again, I think it's pretty good like representation of like what relationships are. Okay, the gay button. So there's a quote from a game designer called Adrian Shaw. If the player needs to push a gay button to see same-sex relationship in games, then anyone who doesn't know or unaware that the button exists can continue to consume the heteronormative dominated text. Basically meaning, like, no homo for video games. So a good example for that is a game called Fable. Again, really love that game. But your character can become gay or bi or like depending on your interactions with other characters. But again, if you're playing the game as straight, like you're not even aware that gay people exist in this world. And yes, they have gay marriage, but like it's literally a joke. Like this game has this like British humor, and they're like, oh, blokes just being blokes when you marry another guy. Yeah, so I don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna skip some of these examples. But another like interesting example, which is a very recent game called Hades. It's about like Greek mythology, and we know that all the gods fuck everybody else. So this game kind of does have a lot of like sexy stuff going on between the different characters. But even when I was playing the game, I didn't know that the main character is bi only later, like when I found out, because like they didn't hide it, but like you need to kind of like go out of your way to find the gay content. But they still get bonus points because your girlfriend and the boyfriend that you find in the game, eventually, like if you romance both of them, they kind of do this like, they basically plan out this like threesome for you. instead of kind of like telling you off. Okay, so where are we today? Today, thanks to basically independent games, we get to see all these like crazy things, but also kind of like stuff like The Last of Us. Spoiler if you haven't watched the show, Ellie is a lesbian. And there's a lot of lesbian sex in the second game, I'm warning you. But there's like fantastic stuff like Dream Daddy, which is basically this like dating simulator game. Fantastic representation, like even to the point of like when you create your own character, you can be a dad with a binder, meaning that you're a trans man who's a dad. I find that really cool. And VR chat is basically, do you know how like Star Trek, for example, holodeck, where they kind of like simulate you can have intercourse with people and all that stuff, but it's like virtual. We already have that. It's technically already here. People are already having virtual intercourse in VR. You can create your own avatar, like you see like the picture over there. And there's a bunch of like sensors that you can connect to your body, and they basically get translated over the internet to another person who's using a similar kind of like system, and you can give them pleasure, etc., etc. Yeah.
The sound wouldn't work now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so conclusion. Sexuality is an integral part of the human experience, and it should be addressed in video games as well. We can't just think over it. This is like, sex is how we reproduce. We kind of have to do it, but we also enjoy it,
Hopefully.
Hopefully, if you're good. I think, in my opinion, any representation is not inherently good or bad, because even when we're talking about like, yes, there is like a gay character, but everybody's treating him like in a homophobic way. In my opinion, it's not considered bad representation. It's more considered as accurate representation. Because even when I walk down the street, people still call me fag. And this is like nowadays. I'm not talking about like years ago and stuff like that. We need more queer people making queer games and characters. And please don't hide your gay content behind hashtag gay.
All right.
So with that all said, this is the video game that I'm working on. It's called Neon Death Drop. And I'm going to show you the trailer. It's very short. Hopefully the sound works.
Yes.
All right, boys, let's get this show started.
Sir, drop the floor and push them in.
I didn't realize you were all into group play. Fuck my life. Step up, Sally. Back up, Becky. Woo! And that's a happy ending.
I think something big is coming.
Damn, Daddy!
Not really that.
All right.
Fabulous. That was incredible. Wait, hang on for all right. We're gonna do one question. That was fantastic. That looks actually a lot like it reminds me of Hades.
Yep, that was one of the inspirations.
Yeah. Which by the way, anyone who has not played what is it, Dream Daddy?
Yes.
It's so good. It's really good. Like you owe it to yourself to play it. It's really fucking funny, and it's beautiful. It's a delightful game. Anyway, sorry. I see one very excited person over here.
Yes.
Who's your favorite gay video game character?
Favorite gay video game character?
My favorite gay video game character, other than mine. That's a good question. I think that probably has to be Vamp from Metal Gear Solid because he's just so fierce. He's just and he always comes back to life, you know.
It's important. It's very important.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah.
All right. Video games. Yeah.
What would you say is the next goal for gender and sexuality in video games, as far as like social markers?
Right.
What is something you want to see in the games going forward?
So I think the biggest thing is to normalize gender variation in character creation. We need to just normalize like titties does not mean women. Dick does not mean man, you know? And yeah, there's a lot of games who do like really good work with that. Like Cyberpunk, for example, you can customize like all that stuff and it's just like not related at all. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Fantastic. Mark